Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another recommendations video. It is that time of year when there is snow falling off of my roof because the sun came out today, so don't mind that. And there are a couple things that I really love to read when it starts to get chilly, when there's snow on the ground. And so my next couple of recommendation videos are going to be those type of stories for us, and I'm very excited. So this one today, as you can tell, is a forced proximity romances. I have made quite a few of these videos actually, so I'll link a couple in the cards if you would like more. And for this one, like I've made ones before where I was more like specific about the forced proximity. Like I've made one that was snowed in romances. I did one that was apocalypse and end of the world, forced proximity, like survival scenarios. And so for this one, I have a bit of a mix of everything. I have paranormal, contemporary, dystopian. Yeah, I have a little bit of everything in here. So we're going to go through some of my favorite books for forced proximity, which is something I like to read in the winter time. Another rec video that I will have coming out, which is either already up or you will be seeing it soon, is actually going to be winter romances, and there is definitely some overlap with these, but I just figured I'd break it into two videos instead of putting them all in one, you know? Gotta pack the content in around here. But the first books that I want to talk about are actually in a series, and they're a series that I have not shut up about since I first read them. And what I talked about in my survival forced proximity was actually this book called Last Light, which is there's been a disaster, an asteroid hit the Earth. For the last 4 years, Earth has been barely habitable. We lost like a huge percentage of Earth's population, and the people that are left, it's a bit like The Walking Dead around here, even though there isn't a zombie plague. So this one I talk about in that video, so I won't go into it much in here, but this one is an age gap. It's two people from the same town. This girl, Lane, who is about 20 years old, and our hero, Travis, who's in his late 30s. They're both wanting to go to the same place where they believe people from their town are, and so they end up traveling together. Love it. Now, the books that connect with Last Light, which Last Light is technically listed as a standalone, but in my opinion, it's kind of a prequel / a connecting book into the Kindle series, which when I first read Last Light, Haven was the only book that was out in this series, because Claire Kent hadn't written more. But Haven is a novella length, and this one is about a town, and Jackson and Faith are kind of the people like in charge of this town, of mostly younger people when it starts, and they look out for this town. It's like a walled and protected town as well. And it really does become a haven, and it becomes a city, a town that many of the characters, I mean, all of the characters so far that I've met in this world come in contact with Haven at one point or another. They'll stay there. As we get further out from the apocalypse event, like the towns start to be more like people visit each other. There are not quite businesses put up yet, but things are starting to get a little more like community based instead of every person for themselves. So definitely love this one. This is Faith and Jackson, and it involves their relationship going from a completely physical scenario where they're just finding pleasure in each other, but during the day they don't really speak, to their love story. And like I said, this one's pretty quick, and this one's also a great one if you'd like to taste test if you'll like the series. A few of my friends who have gotten into these books, they've actually like started with this one because it is book one in the Kindle series, and then they went to Last Light later. Last Light for me is a place to start just because I feel like we find out a lot about the world from Travis and Lane. But you can read Haven, see if you want a taste for it. And then earlier this year, Claire announced the rest of more of the books in the series, because she's going to be writing even more. And so there's Princess. Now, this one was great because we really got to get a feel for the world. And this one was about I always forget the names because they, the POV is always from the heroines, but the hero in this one is Grant, and then I can't remember what the heroine's name is, but she's actually a wealthy person, and when her father has actually been prepared for the apocalypse, and he actually bought them a spot within this like missile silo that was going to be an end of the world scenario. So for the first 3-4 years of the apocalypse, they're all pretty much safe and cozy inside this silo, which has a swimming pool, and it has where everybody does a job. Like, it's very much like communal living. And what we see in this is it's between our heroine and Grant, who is kind of a bodyguard in the beginning. Like, her father hires him to collect her from college and get her back to this silo. I think she's in college or high school, I can't remember. And then through the years, you know, her father dies pretty early on, and her and Grant have this connection. This one was just so interesting too because we're around so many people, and the way that the characters in this one meet the people from Haven is very interesting to me. So I really liked this one. And then Embers is the most recent one that came out. This is one that a lot of my friends have loved a lot because this one is a dead boyfriend's dad. And this one to me is the most claustrophobic of them. And just in the fact of like, this one does cross over to like a winter romance for me because we see more of what's happening in the apocalypse, like as it's happening, being like outside. So this one picks up a year after the asteroid hits, and our heroine, Rachel, and her boyfriend, they are in a pretty bad way. They had been in one of the cities, and Rachel's mom had died, and then I think his name is Derek. Derek's mom had died, and Derek is actually getting sick. So he's getting, his lungs are being consumed by what is left in the air, and him and Rachel are trying to get out of the city. And Cal, who is Derek's dad, he is an ex-con. He lives in a shack in the mountains. He is a really gruff, tattooed, tough guy. And he was very estranged from Derek and his mom. He actually didn't even know that Derek was his until he was young. But Cal comes into town to try to find his family because he's like, what's going on? And he gets there in the nick of time to save them. So they move out to his small one-room cabin up on a mountain. And over the next 8 months, we watch Derek die. And by watch, I mean the beginning of this, we really skip through time pretty quickly. So it's not like it's agonizing. But Rachel is then left alone with this surly man in his one-room cabin. And they spend the next 3 years there. And over that time, she starts to get feelings for him, and he suffers horrible guilt and like shame for having feelings for her, to the point that it causes some problems in their relationships. But all of Claire Kent's heroes, every one of these, are these emotionally constipated yet incredibly sweet, gruff men all in their way. Whether they're a military man like Grant, or they're an ex-con like Cal, or they are a mechanic like Travis, they are beautiful, grumpy men, and I just highly, highly recommend this series. Like, it has some good steam, but it's not like overwhelmed by it because we are also trying to survive. So anyway, now that I spent 10 minutes of the video talking about the Kindle series, you should definitely go read it. Also, Last Light does have an audiobook. None of the other ones do at this point. I'm hoping someday she will for those, but the first one does have it. Next, I will really quickly talk about this one because I've talked about this book a ton, but it definitely fits for forced proximity, and that is Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton. This one involves our heroine who causes some problems for our hero Enzo in the beginning of this book. They have a one-night stand. She steals his identity. He finds out that she did. He invites her out on his boat and pretends that they're going to make amends. Then he ends up fucking her in a very dangerous way. Almost kind of against her will, not completely, but you'll see. It's a consensual experience that turns into a non-consensual experience type of situation. But what happens is Enzo, in his rage that he has for this woman, because they had such a great connection, or so he thought, and then she stole his identity, and he's just so angry about it. Fair enough, in my opinion, to a certain degree. And they end up in a storm, and they end up trapped on this very small lighthouse island with a crazy lighthouse keeper who's just completely bonkers. And they're trapped there for a significant amount of time until they're able to get help. So it's quite the adventure. It's also spooky. It has some thriller elements, maybe some paranormal elements. Who knows? Won't say, but it's a good one. I have a fun time with it. Then I have Sweet Like Poison by Wolfe, which is another one of my favorite books of the year. This one to me has forced proximity in a couple of ways. So we have Elena and we have Lachlan, and they're neighbors. And Lachlan actually lives in one of Elena's properties. So her father owns some rental properties that they rent out to students going to Savage U, and she is the rental manager. And her friends live next door to Lachlan and his friends. And Lachlan and Elena just he has some preconceived notions about her. I would like to say that it's mostly Lachlan who has some prejudices against her, but when at the beginning of this book she needs help with a project, he just does it, and they end up having this weekend fling before their friends come back to school, and Elena just feels such a sexual connection with him. I know that's strange, but that's how this relationship starts. But Lachlan doesn't want to fall for anyone because he has plans for his life, plans for when he's out of school, and he doesn't want to fall for anyone that might change his plans. So he's definitely very guarded. He also, again, has preconceived notions about Elena and just doesn't want to get entangled with a high-class bitch like her. That's how he sees her in his mind. He sees her as this snooty princess. Boy does not know the depth of Elena and who she is, which is a journey he will need to go on. But I just love their connection so much. And I love the proximity of them living right next door to each other. And Elena in the mornings will go out on her deck to enjoy a coffee and read the paper. And she will do it in her pajamas, which Lachlan finds offensive because they're very hot pajamas. So yeah, this one's great. Great forced proximity in that one. Then another book on my favorites list that I will mention is Resting Witch Face by Juliet Cross. This one has forced proximity in the fact that Jules and Ruben, who this is a second chance romance for them, they are going on a crusade together, sort of. They're going on this tour to different covens in the United States and eventually in Europe to discuss the werewolf problem. And by problem, it's the fact that werewolves have been kind of cut out of the, magical circle, and they haven't had a say in the paranormal world, and it's time that changes. And so Jules and Ruben go on this road trip, and so it's definitely forced proximity that ends up with them at a small town B&B during a tantric sex retreat. So that's really great for these two who used to be together 12 years ago, and Ruben very much would like to be back with Jules because he knows that she's his fated mate, and she has been very stubborn about that for a really long time, and it's time to push past those differences and get together. This is book 5 in this Stay a Spell series, by the way. You should probably read these books in order. Just saying. There's beautiful art like this involved, so just saying. All right, then I have a book that I just recently read that is called Cold Hearted by Heather Greer. If you've seen my weekly wrap-up recently, you'll know that I very much called this some Twilight fanfic if you're Team Jacob. And I mean, I stand by it. I stand by it. But this is forced proximity in the fact that our heroine moves to this small town in Alaska to be a school teacher there. She is fleeing from an abusive ex. We don't fully know the scope of that abuse or what was going on, but we know that it wasn't good or healthy for her. And so, but she's also struggling with depression quite a bit. She feels very down. She feels very like drained of life, basically. And she's in this town that may or may not have a bunch of werewolves in it that she is oblivious to, but won't be oblivious to for long. And particularly, there is one grumpy man who stays in the same boarding house as her. He's also the pilot who had brought her to this small town. And he just seems to hate her, and we don't know why. He's so grumpy with her, and he glares at her across the kitchen table, you know, in the dining room. But as the secrets unravel, and as we find out that she may not have escaped her ex like she thinks she did, things are going to get pretty interesting. So I really enjoyed this book recently, and I've also read the second book, which had vampires in that one. So I'm really, really enjoying it. I want to read more for sure. Then we have His Saving Grace by Kylie Gopal. This is another paranormal. I had a lot of paranormals in these. This one's very interesting. I read this one last month. This was actually a patron pick for me. They really wanted me to read this book. This one is a fated mate, but in a very interesting way, because our heroine actually had a fated mate and he died. This happened quite a few years ago, but she's still never been the same. And then our hero, he is an alpha of his own pack, and he had a mate. She wasn't a fated mate, but she was his mate, and they actually had a daughter together. And then she had left him, and it almost broke him. Because in this place, like, you have to accept the mating bond, but once you've accepted the mating bond, if you break it, usually the other person could die. And our hero was able to stay around basically because he has this beautiful little daughter, and he doesn't want to give up because he has her. But when he goes to visit this other pack, which is where our heroine lives, he goes there for a peace treaty to be signed. He knows that this woman is his mate. And he's like, I need a mate, because in this world too, like, when you find your mate, it can give you like a power boost. It's good for you. And he just can't be brokenhearted that way again. So he does some dirty dealings, basically threatening that he won't sign this peace treaty if she doesn't come and at least live in his pack with him. She doesn't have to accept the mating bond right away, but she needs to come to his pack, or else he's not going to accept it. So she's kind of forced into that, so she does it begrudgingly. And so now we have a forced proximity of her literally living in his home, getting to know his daughter, and deciding if she does want to accept it and become a part of his pack and be his Luna, be his mate. Then we have King of Wrath by Anna Huang. This one is an arranged marriage between the wealthy elites. This is kind of like a billionaire romance. There's a little bit of like dark family dealings mixed in. I would call it like mafia adjacent, even though no official mafia ties have been named in this one. There's some dirty dealings going on. This is the first book in Anna Huang's new series that she's putting out, and I really like this one. And this one is forced proximity in the fact that they get engaged because our heroine's father blackmails Dante into it. And Dante is able to work it where the engagement will last for a year. And during this time, the heroine will live with him to make it look like for the people who care about the rich people in the world that they are like in love and that they're living together and all this stuff. So yeah, they move in together, and it's forced proximity for a year. And it was really good. I liked this one a lot. Then we have Hush Darling by Avery Kingston. This is another one that could also fit like in the winter category, because I believe it's a winter storm that causes the beginning of this. Our heroine, she is pregnant. She was kind of forcibly made pregnant by her abusive husband, who is a part of the mafia, but this is not a mafia romance. And he's an abusive man. And when our heroine realizes she's pregnant, her best friend helps her to run away. And so she runs away and she ends up in this small town. And she is trying to make it to Canada. And then there's a storm. And so she ends up off the road near where our hero, who is a deaf hero, by the way, which the deaf representation, in my opinion, was done very well in this book, him and his dog, and he actually owns some rental cabins, and he notices there's smoke coming out of one of the cabins, and our heroine, like we said, it went off the road, and she was near one of the rental cabins. So she broke in, and I mean, she's planning to talk to the owner, but she is very cold. And so she's taking a bath. And so she doesn't hear when he's knocking on the door. And so he comes in and finds her in the bath. And then they have some awkward interaction because he's like, actually, I'm deaf, like I can't hear you, but here we go, we'll talk with our phones, and what are you doing here? And he immediately is like, don't worry about it, let me make sure you have some food and you're safe, and when the roads clear up, like, don't worry about it. But they end up being stuck there for a little bit and sharing things with each other. So I really, really enjoyed this one. I definitely want to read more of this author, for sure. Then we have we'll do one more, actually. Well, there's two more, but I mean, we'll do one more. That's another like winter one that causes problems. So there's Redemption by Kenya Wright. And this was just kind of a surprise to me. I got the audiobook during an audiobook sale, and then I grabbed the ebook to go along with it. And number one, this ebook has illustrations, which start out very tame. They're very tame. There are some illustrations throughout. And then they get spicy. So there are smutty illustrations in this book. It's amazing. I want to get a physical copy of this book eventually. But this one is a woman and her 2 or 3 kids. I can't remember how many kids they are. Her husband is abusive. And one night he like legit almost kills her. He's going to rape her. He's holding a gun to her head and making her service him. And then she's able to get the upper hand and she shoots him and they get away. But her husband is he's ex-military or a police officer. I can't remember, but basically like she's in a rough spot, and her mother actually like helps her ex find her. So she can't even be in contact with her mother, which is really it's really sad. So they make a run for it. They end up going off the road, and our hero and his 2 dogs, he has 2 huskies named Salt and Peppa. All right. His dogs are named Salt and Peppa. It's amazing. This is also interracial. This is an Asian man, Black woman romance, which love it. And our hero is actually like he was a mafia assassin until he wouldn't kill someone that they asked him to kill. And then they killed his wife and child. And he was actually married to a Black woman before too. So he's living in kind of this self-imposed exile right now. But he opens up his home to them, and he decides pretty quickly that like he wants this family to be his and he wants to protect them. So when he finds out about her abusive ex, he's like, he's not going to be a problem. We're going to take care of this. So loved it. Love this kind of hero. It was brilliant. And then the last book I want to talk about, this one is the most taboo of everything I've mentioned, and that's Brutal Intentions by Lilith Vincent. This book is a stepdad-stepdaughter romance, and our stepfather, he's not a lot older than the heroine. He actually is like, he's like 10 years older than her, and like 12, 15 years younger than her mother, but it is an arranged mafia marriage between him and the mother, and he is supposed to have a child with the mother as soon as possible. That's what he's supposed to do, but he's very entranced by his new stepdaughter, and things get spicy and naughty, and he definitely is not the best behaved. This does have a birth control manipulation and forced pregnancy in here, so be prepared for that to happen. But I really enjoyed this book, and our twisted hero really worked for me. But this one is forced proximity, because he moves into their house and starts doing what he's doing there. So there you go. There are some forced proximity romances for you. I hope you will cozy up with one of these. And again, make sure to check out my other forced proximity videos or the winter romances that I'm going to put out shortly, which will be mostly forced proximity as well. But like I said, we split it up into two. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I put up 3 to 4 videos a week. I mean, let's just call it 4. That's what it is. I also have a Patreon and channel memberships if you'd like to support what I do here. This is my full-time job, so any support you can send my way just keeps me pumping out the romance recs for you guys. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.